This is Super Yacht News with E. Sisman.
Hi, welcome back to the channel. So Mike Lynch, the owner of the superyacht Bayesian, which sank off the coast of Porticello in Sicily on the 19th of August, killing him and his daughter and some other guests, had two personal hard drives locked in a safe on board, which are now going to be recovered by Italian divers. The Italian newspaper La Repubblica reported that the tech billionaire, whose clients included MI5, the NSA, and the Israeli Secret Service, didn't trust confidential documents on the cloud and kept two encrypted hard drives in his safe. The safe is now sitting in 50 meters of water, isn't it, on the seabed? Now, the intrigue in this story just keeps getting deeper and deeper, doesn't it? The divers have already recovered the hard drives from the CCTV system, and according to Reuters, now the personal hard drives are the target of those divers. According to investigators in Palermo, none of the personal effects of the 7 victims have been recovered, but the vessel is still under 24-hour surveillance. Now, the CCTV hard drives and possibly other hard drives from the vessel, probably the PMS systems, which monitors the engines and all of the ship's systems, they've been recovered. I think those PMS computer hard drives will have been recovered as well, to try to see if they can find out what was happening in those final moments before the vessel sank. The hard drives have been sent to a lab outside of Sicily to see if the data can be recovered. Now, in the last video, I showed you a photograph of one of the other vessels built by Perini Navi, the company that built Bayesian. And I showed you a picture of the mast, and it had 2 CCTV cameras on that mast. Now, this is common for superyachts. The cameras would generally be pointed one forward and one aft. This is pretty common on superyachts. One of them is pointed towards the bow of the vessel, but also shows the sea in front. The other one's pointed towards the stern and shows the sea behind. And these cameras would be pointed in those directions when they're at sea, but when they're at anchor, those cameras can be moved at 365-degree cameras, so they can be moved. When there are things like tender operations going on, the cameras will be pointed to that so the bridge can see what's happening. So the cameras may not be pointed in the directions they were intended to, but they'll still probably show something of what happened. Now, those cameras are not night vision cameras. Very often yachts have cameras, flare cameras on board, which are night vision, but these types that I showed you on the mast, they are not that type of camera, but they'll probably still pick up something. Now, in the previous video, we talked about the possibility that at least 5 of the victims had moved into a cabin and had suffocated, and we explained the medical side of that in the previous video, so I'm not going to go into it here. If you want to see that video, I'll put a link in the top corner if you haven't seen it already. But the evidence that they found in the autopsies pointed to suffocation through lack of oxygen rather than drowning. Now, further evidence has come from those autopsies that 4 of the victims had carbon dioxide in their lungs. So this could possibly point to them, to further point to the fact that they were suffocated from a lack of oxygen rather than drowning. Now, some of the captain's testimony before he invoked his right to remain silent has been leaked to Italian newspapers or has been disseminated. Somehow they weren't clear about how they got this information. But according to Corriere, he told prosecutors that Seaman Griffiths came to wake me up and told me that there were 20 knots of wind. I looked at the instruments, and indeed that was the case. Now, what he means by that is he's still in his cabin, but very often the captain will have a couple of screens in his cabin. One will show the radar. The other one will show another screen that gives him data about what's happening, so he doesn't have to go onto the bridge constantly. He can see what's happening from his cabin. So he says, I went out immediately and I asked them to warn everyone because I didn't like the situation. He said the Bayesian tilted 45 degrees and remained like that for a bit and then suddenly fell to the right. Now remember that 45 degrees, he said we were catapulted into the sea. Now, if you've been watching the videos, you'll know that we talked about something called the downflooding angle for this yacht being around 45 degrees. Now, much talk has been made of this sailing yacht's ability to heel over to almost 90 degrees, still to be able to right herself. However, the downflooding angle has not really been spoken about, certainly by people who have been defending or blaming crew rather than accepting that it could be some feature of the yacht. There are a series of vents on the side of the vessel, and they are for letting air into the vessel, letting air out of the vessel, for engine room, engines to supply air to the engines. Obviously, it's a sailing yacht, but it has engines. Also, you have the galley, you have the crew areas, the guest areas. You all need air for the HVAC, and those vents are on the side of the vessel. Now, in the case of an extreme event like this, those vents need to be closed to prevent water from entering into those vents. If this doesn't happen, you have something called downflooding. The watertight compartments won't save the vessel because the water's coming in from above. Now, back to the testimony, Seaman Matthew Griffiths said, a 22-year-old said, we somehow climbed back up onto the bridge. This is after they were flung into the sea. And we tried to form a human chain to save those who managed to reach the gap from the accommodation deck. They were struggling on the walls because the boat was lying in the water on the side. He doesn't say on the side, but I assume that's what he means. The first in the chain was the captain, who stretched down. He helped everyone, the ladies, the mother with the little girl, but we were sinking, and unfortunately some didn't make it. The investigation into the captain, James Cutfield, and the engineer, Tim Parker-Eaton, and Matthew Griffiths, the deckhand who was on watch on the bridge at the time, continues. Now, it should be stressed, I've mentioned this in every video, I think, that the investigation does not equate to being charged. It's a procedural thing that they do in Italy, and it's something that they do to decide whether any criminal charges should be brought. Obviously, we'll bring you more on that when we have it. Now, we've got one last thing before we go. We had an image and an email sent in to us by one of our subscribers, Dr. Daniel Lyndhurst. The photo is from Ibiza. And if you remember, a few weeks ago, we showed you all the groundings of those yachts there, just a few weeks just before the Bayesian sank. Anyway, he sent us that photograph and the following words. He said, following the storm a few weeks ago, most of the vessels, except two, have been salvaged. Although no superyacht, it's a historic and iconic maxi racer from the late 70s. The boat was originally commissioned for Herbert von Karajan. I'll put his name on screen. I'm not sure if you pronounce it that way. Who is one of the most famous concert conductors in German-speaking countries. The boat has raced in several important offshore races. Unfortunately, it sits on the rocks right in front of Es Molly de Sal in Formentera, which is a spectacular but very sad sight. Hopefully it will be recovered soon. If you know why that boat is still there, please be sure to get in touch. All right, guys, if you've got any information for us about any of these stories or any others, you can get us in the email address and the ticker. You can get us on the About page of the YouTube channel, get us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Threema. Please be sure to like this video, very important for the algorithm. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for future notifications. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch up with you soon. Bye-bye.